So on the 21st of May 2024, Ubisoft would release XDefiant, their new free-to-play arena shooter consisting of various elements of their other, more successful IPs. Now, upon its release, this game exploded in popularity, peaking at 11 million players during its pre-release, and given the state of Modern Warfare 3 at the time, was genuinely hailed to be the next COD killer. However, as the months have gone on and the hype of competitors has begun to rise again, XDefiant has somewhat faded into the background of gaming, and with just over 1 million players at the time of recording, it's looking as if XDefiant is only dwindling into obscurity. So what has caused Ubisoft's promising new IP to completely fall by the wayside in a matter of months? Let's sit back and discuss how XDefiant has failed. But before we get into it, if you do love all things gaming and you haven't subscribed yet, please do consider it. I think we're very close to being at around 100 right now, so if we could get that off the back of this video, that would be awesome. Anyway, before we get into XDefiant's shortcomings, I would just like to prefix this video by saying that I do genuinely still enjoy this game. I do think this is one of the more solid shooters out there, so I'm not making this video out of like a hate cry, just more of a what I think has gone wrong with the game itself. Anyway, let's cover what makes the game so great to begin with, right? Because a few months ago, this was genuinely the most appealing shooter out there on the market. Again, there's obviously a reason that 11 million players hopped on the game during that lull period in the summer. And to me, one of the main things that immediately gripped me personally was the gunplay. Now, I don't know if it was just me, but it really took me back to that classic, like, quote-unquote golden age of Call of Duty. So you're thinking like your Modern Warfares to your Black Ops 2s, and it was just so satisfying getting the kills. It felt as if the time to kill was good as well. I do tend to personally prefer games that have a longer time to kill, as I feel there's a little bit more skill involved, and it's not just pure reflexes and that. But all in all, the gunplay across a wide range of the weapons was incredibly solid. Everything just felt as if it had such a weight to it, and for me, the customization which they have is perfect. I feel like it matches that blend of the newer COD games where you have like a billion attachments to pick from, but it also replicated that similar feel of the pick 10 system from like Black Ops 2, where you obviously had that limited number of things you could apply to your loadout. I wish there was an ability to add a lethal on a tactical device, but I understand these loadouts kinda aim to be built in a different way, due to there being factions in the game. Speaking of the factions, I do feel like these were a really interesting element implemented into this game, because it made it almost feel like that hero shooter vibe, kinda like what you have in an Overwatch, even though it very much was nothing like Overwatch at the same time. Now don't get me wrong, some were significantly more overpowered in some areas than others, like the suicide bomb cleaner that would literally just destroy anything that comes near you. That's still busted in my opinion. But it seemed to be attempting to build off that hero shooter elements that we've sort of seen in the likes of an Overwatch and a Battleborn and things like that. Particularly when you combine the initial roster of purely objective game modes that this game came with. Obviously with the likes of that sort of payload and then sort of like zone capture, all of those modes are very reminiscent of the more objective based shooters. Now for me, these gamers were a real highlight of the game itself, as it meant that those players that don't necessarily go and drop loads of kills each match are still getting rewarded for their style of gameplay. It gave meaning to those that wanted to play more of a supportive role. So for example, I love focusing on sort of trying to win the objective in games, so I'd frequently pick the Phantoms and use that big dome shield and then blow people away as they came into it. The factions complemented the varying abilities that they had perfectly. And again, from that objective shooter standpoint, this really made XDefiant a really solid and enjoyable game. Now that enjoyment was only enhanced through one of the main selling points, to me at least, of XDefiant itself, that being that there was no skill-based matchmaking. Now, this was a massive change of pace and was very refreshing when you compare it to like your Call of Duties at the minute, whose, well, they include skill-based matchmaking and it's fucking horrible, anybody can tell you that. I get that there's a big debate as to whether it belongs in games or not. Personally, I think the game should have both. There's no reason why skill-based matchmaking can't be in a ranked mode, and it doesn't need to be in a casual mode, and then you've got both. Anyway, that's a whole nother video. But I like the fact that you could go out there and absolutely destroy a team, or equally, you could get absolutely massacred. Because, and I sound like an old man saying this, but back in my day, that's how games used to be. You never really knew what you were going to get. Nobody enjoys getting bodied, obviously, but to me it's better than every game being a challenge and feeling like a job just to win the game or get a positive KD. To me, it helps reward those who have played the game more, which granted, probably isn't the best way to attract new players. However, when you're in a team with your friends and you're absolutely destroying another team and you're kicking ass, there's really no better feeling in video games. However, with the good must also come bad, and unfortunately XDefiant has had some hiccups both initially and still within its current state. Now, even though this was resolved really early doors, I can't not mention it, but some of the hit reg was so fucking sus due to the movement being just absolutely wild initially. I remember people like sliding around and jumping and doing like 360s and shit. It's kind of like the early stages of Omni movement, what we're seeing in Black Ops really. But yeah, hitbox and hit reg was absolutely off the wall, to be honest. But it's obviously not the main problem with XDefiant. To me, I feel like the main things that have caused this game to, well, die is lack of updates and new content and stagnated progression. Now, as I said earlier, I played this game significantly during the pre-release period, and the more I look back, I'm struggling to see what is really largely different between me playing it back in May and me going back and revisiting it for this video. Now, from what I can see, there's been 2 new game modes added. Again, I appreciate that's probably fairly fast turnaround time. You don't often see 2 new game modes added to Call of Duty in the best part of 4 months. However, this game only released with 5 game modes, and it's now up to 7. Don't get me wrong, that's obviously an improvement, but that's not a lot of content, really. Obviously, I appreciate there's been loads of new camos added and loads of new microtransaction things there, because granted, as it's free to play, this is how this type of game would make money. But in terms of actual core fundamental aspects of the game, you've had 2 new game modes, 1 new group of factions, or a faction in the GSK from 6 Siege, which is cool, and you've had 2 new guns. 2. In a game that only had about 20 overall to begin with. That is simply not enough content. Honestly, this has really given me sort of Halo Infinite levels of incompetence when it comes to things like that, where again, that's another game that started with about 4 game modes, but made sure that it definitely decked out the microtransactions because it needed to make money, because it was free to play. And in a similar vein to XDefiant, once you've had that initial spike of players, if you're not releasing anything new, those players plummeted, just as they did in Infinite. So not only was the content not there from day one, but the progression and the unlocking of the content that was available at that time was just terrible, in my opinion. So let's take the guns, for example. Unlocking guns with challenges is really, really stupid. I don't like when a game dictates how I have to play to unlock new things. I get it fully with like camos, so like I'll go get this amount of headshots, because they're not essential to play the game. The same with like daily and weekly challenges. You don't need to do them to play the game. You do them and you get the reward for doing them. That's the point of them. A reward shouldn't limit your access to core aspects of the game. I shouldn't have to get 15 marksman long rifle kills to unlock the next marksman rifle. It just fully dictates and restricts the flow of gameplay, and you either have players camping or adjusting the method they play, because there's literally no other way to go about progressing and earning new rewards and guns and gadgets and things. This again was a trope that they copied off of Modern Warfare 3, and it was terrible, because by doing this you don't reward the player for just playing the game. You reward the player by making them play it a certain way. To me personally, the most incentivizing way of unlocking stuff is just reaching a higher level, which this game actually does in terms of weapon levels. However, these weapon levels definitely aren't brilliant. There is like no uniqueness to them, like with camos, getting headshots, getting crouch kills, whatever. It's literally get kills, get levels, get camos. It's like a brain dead grind. But that element is there, of use it and you will unlock it. So to me, I can't really understand why that wasn't the case with the guns themselves. Speaking of levels though, just linking to the actual main level that you would have, like your rank, I hate that these are just a number. Like, it feels like there's no significance to it at all. Again, I know that this is sort of a bit of a trope in most modern games, so I'm not just sort of shitting on XDefiant for doing it, but I hate it when it doesn't feel like there's any reward for leveling up other than, oh, it goes up by an increment of 1. It just feels redundant in my mind. Again, not to love on Halo, even though I do love it, but back in like the Halo 3 days, or even like your Call of Duties with your prestiges and stuff, which is coming back in Black Ops 6, those military ranks, or prestiges, work fantastically. And I know that XDefiant might want to be unique and do its own thing, but anything is more than just a number, really. So again, slight nitpick, but it just doesn't incentivize you to play more of it. Like, do you want to play a game and say, oh, I'm level 66, or do you want to play a game and go, oh, I'm fucking Inheritor? Like, there's difference to it. Now, I know we praised the factions earlier from a gameplay perspective, because I do think that they did differentiate this game enough to sort of give it a USP, but in terms of their personality, they really were lacking. Again, this might be a slight nitpick, and it definitely wasn't the primary focus of the game. However, it just felt like they were completely soulless and put nothing into developing any characteristics behind these characters. I get it, they've obviously taken them from their other IPs, but it just feels like an unnecessary proportion of the game you could have just chose to focus on something else with. Or you could have potentially just had all the abilities which are there currently and have the player decide which ones they want to use. You could fully enable customization in that area. Again, some of them are going to be more overpowered than others, but that's the case already. So I don't think it would make too much difference if you could, say, pick the suicide, explosion, fire grenade thing that the cleaners have, as well as like the big dome shield. I guess potentially there'd be balancing issues, but I feel like you could iron out the kinks with that. So what does the future hold for this game? Overall, to me, XDefiant was fantastic, as it did fill the void in that stage of the summer where obviously Call of Duty was a bit rubbish and everybody just wanted a solid, rigid, boots on the ground shooter, and it was good, it was new, it was a fresh lick of paint on the whole genre itself. And again, overall, I do actually still enjoy the game. There's just not a lot to do on there, I'm afraid. I do feel like this game is going to continue to struggle and not rebuild that initial boom it got, obviously, in the earlier months with that 11 million player success. Again, that is very impressive for a free-to-play game. But with Black Ops 6 looking like it's going to be one of the better, more innovative CODs in recent years, and that substantial drop in interest, I do fear that this game will just essentially be remembered as a bit of a rebound, honestly, that we all had a little bit of a month fling with while we were waiting for Call of Duty to butt their ideas up. But more importantly, what do you guys think? Have you been playing XDefiant, or did it breeze past you? Have you looked at new Call of Duty? Do you think that's going to sort of tickle your fancy for the FPS genre for the next year or so? Let me know all your thoughts down below, and as I said earlier, if you haven't subscribed, please do consider it, and liking the video and all that good YouTuber tropey stuff. It would mean the absolute world. Without further ado, hopefully see you in another video sometime soon.